Welcome to Amici, News and Insight from the New York courts. I'm John Carr. Today we are going to honor Hispanic Heritage Month with a diversity dialogue program featuring a first-generation American, the son of immigrants from the Dominican Republic, who grew up in Little Italy, found himself in the unlikely role of interpreter when he was 7 years old, struggled to figure out where or if he fit in, and whether he was fully American, as well as his journey to feeling fully accepted. Rafael Dilones is clerk of the Richmond County Family Court. Rafael, thank you for coming on the program and happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Let's start with your parents, if we could. How and why did they end up in New York City?
I think they ended up here like most immigrants do, in search of opportunity. They immigrated from the Dominican Republic. At the time that they did, or right before then, there was some turmoil there, some political unrest. But I don't think that was what influenced my parents coming here. It was more about, the opportunities that they were seeking, getting out here and trying to build a better life.
How were they able to emigrate? Was that a simple matter, a complicated matter? Did it take a long time, or what was the process?
It did take a while, when I've spoken to my mom especially, she said it was a long drawn out process. In the beginning, my parents were when they started the process, each one of them, they were single. By the time they landed on the Lower East Side, they were already married, but they didn't come here as a couple. My father first got here, and he was, normally I guess the sequence of events would be that he would put in papers for his wife, my mother in this case, to come. But they were all already papers that were submitted when they were single. My grandmother had requested my father to come, and an aunt of my mother's had put in papers for her to immigrate here to the U.S. So yeah, to answer your question, it wasn't easy. It took a while, and there was a process to it, But I think the U.S. at the time, back in the late 50s to early 60s, they were looking for people to do labor, for
Hmm.
laborers to come to the country, and I think my family was part of that wave.
Now, did your parents eventually become American citizens, I assume?
Yes, yes, they both have. My dad has since passed away, but they both did. I actually helped them with the process, filling out the paperwork. Also, was there for the swearing in ceremony. I stood there. I remember standing next to my dad, and I think it's an experience that everyone should. So at some point have part of the swearing in is that you swear no allegiance to any other flag, and that's a big thing. Here were my parents, and they were happy. They were happy to do this. They became U.S. citizens. They crossed that threshold. For my dad, I would think it was a bigger change for him. Because he felt himself to be American to a certain degree, but he felt himself to be Dominican. He was very proud of his Dominican heritage. As am I. And at the time, I think it was hard to bring the two together. It wasn't. I think now it's a lot easier for us to embrace our heritage. I think it's a little easier now than it was, back in the 50s and the 60s.
I think I understand. So the swearing allegiance makes it very permanent, very final,
Yes,
very official.
but it's a moment that I think everyone should experience. Whether you're there just as a spectator, like I was, watching my mom and dad do it. They did it at separate times, but I was definitely impacted by it.
I would imagine. What have they told you about life in Dominican Republic versus life in the United States?
You know, it's kind of a mixed bag, I think, because they say that life in the Dominican Republic was hard. My parents, come from the rural part of the country. They grew up on a farm for the most part, and farm life, I think, like in anywhere, even here in the U.S., can be difficult. They're not rich. They didn't come from money, so for them, and jobs were limited. And they were limited to what, either whether it was raising cattle or farming, doing the day labors and things like that on a farm. It's hard. So they when they compare it to their life here, they would tell me that it was easier, than what they were doing there. They weren't digging ditches and spending the whole day out on the field. But it was also difficult here. They worked long hours. Sometimes, both my mom and dad had two jobs. I think my dad at one time had three. Just to make ends meet, and then the lack of the language didn't help. And then because of the hard life they were leading here, it didn't give them the opportunities to maybe go to night school and learn English, so which made things a little bit more difficult for them.
What did they do for a living?
My dad worked. I think when he first got here, he worked in a restaurant. Towards the end, he was working in a machine shop. He was a machinist to some degree, and my mother was a seamstress. She was a. I remember as a kid, she was a proud member of the ILGWU. I think the International Lady Garments Workers Union. I still remember this because she was so proud of that when she was in that union, that she was a part of that union. So, but yeah, he worked in a machine shop, and she was a seamstress.
That must have been a considerable cultural shock, not only coming to a foreign country, but going from rural farmland to New York City.
It was. I know, recently we were talking about that, and with my mom. My mom is still around. My mom is 91, so God bless her. She's a force to be reckoned with, and she was telling me that was probably one of the biggest hurdles that they faced. When you first get here, it's a complete change. The way that people talk, and not just the language, but just how people interact. Back in the Dominican Republic, they saw family every day. Family getting together with the family was a big part of life. Where here, because of work, if you saw them on the weekends, you were lucky, and you didn't see everyone because mostly everybody worked 6 to 7 days a week. So it was you're right. It was a big shock for them to adjust to this new way of life where everything revolved around, getting to work and getting the kids to school when my brother and I came around.
You were born here, right?
Yes.
So you're a native-born American with every right and every privilege afforded to every other native-born American, including the right to run for president of the United States, right?
Yes. My grandmother would always tell me that. It's funny you say that. But she would say, don't let anybody tell you different. You're an American. You can be president.
But offline, you told me you struggled as a kid growing up in the 70s with your identity and questioned whether you were really an American. I don't understand. You're as American as George Washington.
Yeah. I didn't see anyone in the news, in the people with any kind of authority, like the police officers or the firemen. The people, I didn't see anyone that looked like me or close to me. When I watched the TV show, there was nobody there that resembled any part of me. There were very few people of color, on TV at the time. I remember I used to watch all the old World War II movies, and the cowboys, like John Wayne. You'd see, and I never saw someone that looked like me. So I think that, that had a big part of it in terms of me asking myself, what makes an American? Captain America is not brown. He's not, and I'm not blonde and blue eyed. And everyone that I saw, that, whenever I saw the flag, and at least the way I remember it, it was always, it wasn't representative of who I was, who I am in my skin. And I think that, that's what would make me sometimes question, because I felt that people would question, are you as American as I am? And the other part of that is that growing up, I heard, why don't they speak English? You're in America now. And that's tough, especially, when you're a young child. I think that, that also probably has some influence on that. I think it's a complicated answer. It's a complicated situation.
I think what you're saying, and what I hear frequently in the diversity dialogues, is that optics matter, and that it can be very, very difficult to believe you can be what you can't see.
That is so true. You're 100% correct. When I was in grade school, none of my teachers were of color. They were all great teachers, I have to say. The public school I went to in downtown Manhattan was they were all great teachers, and very encouraging. But I didn't see anyone that looked like me, and I think that matters. When I saw people on TV, whether it was about civil rights or anything like that, the people that had the power, and I was able to recognize that as a child, who had the power and who did not look like me. And the people that were marginalized, I saw them they were me. They were the people that looked like me. So you're absolutely right. Representation matters so much, especially to the young kids. They need to see that, that we not only are we a member of the society, but we have a lot to contribute.
Absolutely. Now, you also mentioned that as a little kid in Little Italy, you were thrust into the unlikely role of interpreter when you were like 7 years old, and not just for your Spanish-speaking parents. Explain, please.
So there was a large wave of immigrants coming into the country, especially downtown, on the Lower East Side. I remember as, I must have been maybe 7 or 8 years old, and my parents would lend me, I guess, for lack of a better term, to my neighbors, as well as, when I went with them. And because they didn't speak English, maybe they had a doctor's appointment that they needed to speak to someone, maybe they had to go to a government office and they needed someone to help them with the process, at least to be their mouthpiece. And back then, back in the in the early to mid 70s, you didn't walk into a government office and there was somebody there. If there was somebody working there that spoke Spanish, you were lucky. But many times that wasn't the case.
And there's all kinds of potential there for things to get lost in translation. So I imagine in your household growing up, the predominant language was Spanish.
Yes.
But as soon as you walked out your front door, the predominant language is English. So you are bilingual. Not necessarily by choice. You had no choice, I guess, right?
It was forced upon us because, like you said, you walk out the door, you're speaking English. You come into the house, you're speaking Spanish. And when I was growing up, my parents spoke very little of any English at all. So we had to speak the Spanish. And when we walked out the door, we had to speak English.
You were an interpreter in the courts at one point?
Yes. I that's how I started in the court system. I took the test years ago on a fluke, and I think I had just started college or in the middle of college, and I saw the ad in the paper. I went down, took the test, but never thought anything of it. Never thought that that I would ever work for government. And I remember there was some kind of hiring freeze. I found out later because years later I get a couple of years later I get a notice asking me to come down for an interview. And I was a little dumbfounded because I had completely forgotten about the whole process. I thought that wasn't going to happen because I had taken the test and I knew that I was on a list, but I didn't know how exactly that worked. So, it was years later when I finally came to the court and was hired and as an interpreter.
Where did you go to college?
Queensborough Community College.
What did you take? What did you major in?
Business.
Now let's shift to your current job, if we could. Is family court clerk in Richmond County. A family court is an inherently stressful environment. I know some people refer to it as society's emergency room.
Family court is tough, especially when you apply it to someone who doesn't speak the language. It's very difficult to, not only are they already under stress, but then you add the stress that they can't convey what it is that's happening to them. But it's a very high hurdle to overcome. I think those are probably some of the cases that really hit it home for me, you might say. Family court is one of those pillars for our society that if we can get it right, if we can help a family get them on that path, help them overcome the what's going on, in their household, that we'll be better as a society. We impact people at all stages of their life, whether it's a couple who has a child and are not getting along, and they come to us to help them with a custody and visitation order to try and sort that out. That affects that child. That child has to deal with their parents, the infighting and what goes on with that, or whether it's a 13-year-old kid who goes down the wrong path and winds up before the court. We have a very big impact I think more so than any other court. I think it starts with us. I think that if we can help someone, at that very early stage, that is the best. That is the best remedy for some of the ills that we have in our society, whether it be domestic violence or whether it be what goes on now in the schools and the juvenile delinquency and things like that. I think we'll be better able to help society in that way. We're also like the first people to see when there are mental health issues happening in the home, because people wind up here and our jurors see that, and they try and help. I do think that family court is core to our society, that we need to pay more attention to what goes on here.
No question. We all bring our own experiences, our life experiences to our jobs, of course. How do you think that your experience as a second generation American child of immigrants affects the way you view your job?
I think my upbringing or that experience of having to go with people to whether it's a doctor's office or a government office, and hearing somebody say to someone, why doesn't he speak English? Tell him he has to learn English. Or, I think that had a big impact in the way I deal with people and my empathy towards the people that come through the doors. I think that it keeps me grounded in that this could be anyone. This could be my sister. This could be my neighbor. And it doesn't necessarily have to do anything to do with the fact that they don't speak English or whether they are native born. It has more to do with just the way that we treat people, that we should treat people with respect and try and help. I think that's the biggest influence I think that it's had on me, that you want to treat people, you want people to be treated with respect, and you want to help them. I think it's innate in all of us. I think we do that naturally to try and help people.
You grew up with people who weren't always treated with respect and who weren't understood. So, I mean, it seems like an obvious source of your empathy.
You're absolutely right.
Tell me about your own family.
We're tight. They were always there. Whenever we were short a babysitter, whether it was my mother or whether it was an aunt, there was always somebody there that could take care of our kids. Both of my boys, I'm very proud of them. He's currently he's still in school. He's working on a PhD. And my other son, who graduated, he's home with us. He has a degree in biology. So very proud. They both did what I asked. I said, from day one, I said, you guys can be whatever you want to be. You can be doctors or you can be carpenters. But there's one thing that you are going to be is you're going to have a college degree. And they both did that. So I'm very happy, and I'm also very fortunate because, like I said before, my mother's still around, and she never lets us forget the struggles that in a good way that she had, to get here and to go through, her life. My wife, she's an immigrant as well. She immigrated from Colombia when she immigrated in her early 20s. She also has an interesting path because her father immigrated from Germany to Colombia. So it adds to that. It adds to that rich diversity that we all bring to the country. My father-in-law's mother immigrated during World War II, so she wound up as the war, in the middle of the war, she wound up going through from Germany to Portugal to Spain, and then they worked their way down to South America. So they also had a path that they had to lead down to South America.
Now, I know in your free time you are a photographer, and it's been said that photography is a universal language. Is that coincidental, or do you think that springs in some way from your childhood desire to be able to communicate universally?
I never thought of it that way until you mention it now. I think you're right. I think it does have something to do with that. It's just another way of communicating what we see. Sometimes happiness, sometimes sadness, but it is a way of communicating, what you see in the world and what we experience.
What do you like to photograph?
I do love photographing my family to their chagrin. And now lately I've been doing more of just street photography.
Do you or your family do anything special to celebrate or commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month?
It's not really. We're Latino every day. every day of the week. The celebration is in, I guess it's in when we sit down to dinner, pernil or tostones, things like that. I guess that's the celebration that we do every day.
Rafael, thank you so much for your time and for your insight.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, for having me.